Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really hard look at a super popular, honestly kind of utopian myth. It's this idea that if we just hand out artificial intelligence tools to everyone, we're going to instantly level the educational and professional playing fields. I mean, it's a beautiful thought, right? You give every single student a smart adaptive learning tool, you hand every worker a generative AI assistant, and poof, suddenly all these historical disadvantages just melt away. But, as you might guess, recent data is revealing a much more complicated reality. We're actually watching a brand new digital divide open up right before our eyes. And spoiler alert, it has absolutely nothing to do with who owns the fastest computer.
Okay, let's dive right into this because this is really the core question we have to answer. Is access to artificial intelligence genuinely boosting our human capabilities, or are we quietly falling into a massive cognitive trap? Think about it. When an AI can write your essay, summarize a complex 50-page report, or solve a tricky math problem in literally 3 seconds, it frees up a tremendous amount of working memory. But it also creates this huge, glaring temptation to just outsource our critical thinking entirely. As we'll see, the benefits of AI don't just magically happen the second you log in. They require a very specific set of human skills to actually unlock.
To really understand what's happening here, we have to completely redefine the term digital divide. For decades, the first-level digital divide was super simple. It was all about physical access. Who has a laptop? Who has broadband internet? But as physical access has become nearly universal, especially in developed nations, the divide has shifted. This new AI-driven divide isn't about hardware anymore. It is entirely cognitive. It's all about who actually possesses the digital literacy to use these incredibly complex tools, rather than just sitting back and passively consuming whatever they happen to spit out. To see this playing out in the real world, let's look at a massive recent study of nearly 4,500 grade 6 students over in the Netherlands. We're seeing a really wide distribution in how these students are actually engaging with AI tools. Some kids are jumping in, using a bunch of different tools across all sorts of contexts, while others are barely using them at all or only when forced to at school. To make sense of all this data, the researchers used a sophisticated machine learning algorithm to calculate an AI usage intensity score for every single student. This score basically captured the whole shebang, how many tools they used and exactly how intensely they engaged with them on a day-to-day basis. Now, you might reasonably assume that the students with the highest AI usage intensity, the ones using the tools the absolute most, would automatically see the biggest boost in their academic performance, right? Well, actually, the data revealed a massive subversion of expectations. Sheer AI usage intensity, it barely moved the needle. I mean, it had a statistically significant but practically negligible effect on their grades. Instead, the real hero driving students' success was digital literacy. It wasn't about how often the kids interacted with the AI, it was about their underlying competency, their autonomy, and their ability to critically navigate that digital environment and solve problems. What's super fascinating here is how this ties so deeply into human psychology. The researchers started looking at personality traits, things like openness to experience, extroversion, and perseverance. And they found that these traits absolutely influence a student's success. But, and this is a big but, only when they are mediated by digital literacy. So for instance, being a highly perseverant student doesn't boost your grades just because you spend 5 hours aimlessly clicking around an AI tool. It boosts your grades because that perseverance helps you build deeper digital literacy. You're figuring out how the tool works, you're troubleshooting when it completely breaks, and you're critically engaging with the material. Digital literacy is the necessary bridge here. AI usage alone, that's just a bridge to nowhere. And this brings us to a really stark, honestly kind of uncomfortable reality when it comes to educational inequality. The researchers noted that families' socioeconomic status, or SES, demonstrated a very strong direct relationship with academic performance, but here is the absolute kicker. Socioeconomic advantages persisted regardless of the AI tools implemented in the classroom. Handing out AI software didn't just magically erase the systemic advantages of wealth and resources. Even when you gave everyone equal access to the exact same fancy learning platforms, the structural inequalities remained firmly intact. And this brilliantly illustrates a much larger problem, one that extends way past grade 6 classrooms and straight into the adult workforce. We're fundamentally misunderstanding the technology we're dealing with. See, traditional IT and software, they're verifiable, they're static, they run on clear rules, and they have completely transparent inferential steps. If a calculator gives you a number, you can inherently trust the underlying math.
But generative AI is a completely different beast. It's this opaque, probabilistic, highly fluent engine. It sounds incredibly confident, even when it is literally confidently hallucinating facts out of thin air. The skills we use to evaluate a calculator simply do not work when you're talking to a chatbot.
Because generative AI is so smooth and sounds so authoritative, it triggers a really dangerous psychological phenomenon called over-reliance. This is our tendency to depend on AI outputs way beyond what is actually warranted by their accuracy. The AI instantly hands us a beautifully formatted, articulate answer, which feels great because it frees up our working memory, but it also tricks our brains. It sends a signal saying, hey, the hard work is done, which prompts us to just completely bypass our own critical evaluation. We defer to the machine way too readily, we accept its outputs at face value, and that creates a massive vulnerability for us. We can actually break down this cognitive trap using something called the heuristic systematic model of information processing. Notice that our brains generally run on two different tracks. Heuristic processing is fast, it's intuitive, and it relies on simple cues. So when an AI has a clean interface, a really authoritative tone, and flawless grammar, our heuristic brain says, yep, looks good to me, and we just uncritically accept it. Systematic processing, on the flip side, is slow, it's effortful, and it's analytical. It requires genuine motivation to stop, question the output, and actually fact-check it. The sleek design of modern AI is literally engineered to trigger our lazy heuristic processing and suppress our systematic processing.
Now, what's really interesting about this is this specific number right here, 83.24%. For years, researchers have measured our analytical thinking using something called the Cognitive Reflection Test, or CRT. But in a recent study assessing how adults critically engage with AI, researchers found that over 83% of participants had already seen the standard test items before. The test has become so famous online that it's essentially just an exercise in memorization at this point, not a true test of critical thinking. This proved that we desperately need a brand new way to measure critical thinking, one that is designed specifically for the unique, deceptive nature of generative AI. To solve this exact problem, researchers had to build a brand new psychological instrument from the ground up, the critical thinking in AI use scale. And to be clear, this isn't just a test of whether you know how to write a clever prompt. It measures a user's natural tendency to actually scrutinize the AI they're using. It's broken down into three essential pillars: verification, motivation, and reflection. This scale finally allows us to measure who is actually using AI effectively and who is just blindly outsourcing their human judgment to a server farm. Let's unpack what these three pillars actually look like in practice. First up is verification. This is the active habit of cross-checking sources and validating the AI's content using external tools. You don't just take its word for it, ever. Second is motivation. This means you are actively trying to understand how the AI model actually works behind the scenes, including its limitations and why it might generate a specific, weird response. And the third pillar is reflection. People who score high in critical thinking don't just verify facts. They actually pause to consider the real-world consequences of relying on AI-generated content, things like baked-in biases or the wider ripples it sends through society. Let's move on and see how this builds in a real-world testing environment. To validate this new scale, researchers put participants through an actual fact-checking task using a custom AI chatbot interface. They gave participants statements and asked them to verify if they were correct or incorrect using the chatbot. But, and here's the clever part, the researchers intentionally manipulated the chatbot's responses. Sometimes it provided valid working source links, but sometimes it provided broken links, completely irrelevant links, or just no links at all. They wanted to see exactly how users would behave when the AI's evidence was fundamentally flawed. So they judged the users on three distinct fact-checking behaviors. First was evidence extraction. Did the user successfully click a valid link and use it to find the truth? Second was the misread rate. Did the user totally miss the available evidence and just give up, saying they were unsure? But the absolute most important metric here was evidence gap resolution. This measured what the user did when the AI handed them a broken or irrelevant link. Did they just blindly accept the AI's claim anyway? Or did they have the critical thinking skills to say, nope, leave the chatbot, open a search engine, decisively hunt down the facts themselves, and resolve the gap? So the crucial point is this. The data show that people who scored high on that critical thinking and AI use scale absolutely excelled at evidence gap resolution. When the AI failed to provide evidence, they didn't just throw their hands up and default to uncertainty. They sought corroboration completely outside the chatbot. Furthermore, the study found that frequent AI users are not inherently lazier. In fact, high frequency of AI use was positively correlated with higher critical thinking scores. When users combine frequent interaction with active, deliberate verification habits, they actually become highly adept at navigating AI hallucinations.
AI usage isn't the enemy here. Uncritical AI usage is.
And that brings us to a critical crossroads for educators, for employers, and honestly, for every single one of us using these tools today. We are spending billions and billions of dollars ensuring everyone has access to the absolute latest generative AI models. But as we've just seen, access without literacy doesn't create equality. It just creates a new invisible divide. A divide between those who oversee the algorithm and those who are just directed by it. So I'll leave you with this to ponder about your own habits and our broader societal push. Are we just fighting for AI access, or are we fighting for the AI literacy required to actually stay in control? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.